Hey everybody, I'm Dia Davidson and welcome to another LEX 18 Digital Conversation. World War II was raging in Europe. Racial discrimination and hate was endemic here in America. But despite the hurdles, setbacks, disappointments, and limits, a group of African-American aviators were able to shine, breaking stereotypes, serving their country, and making history along the way. Here to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen is Ron Spriggs. He's the Executive Director and Chapter President of the Brigadier General Noel F. Parrish Chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. Ron, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about who was Noel Parrish.
Wow, as we discussed earlier, Noel Parrish actually was the commandant of cadet training that was offered down in Tuskegee. He came in as the second commander, but he was a very fair-minded guy, and he wanted to make sure that all the Tuskegee Airmen cadets had an equal opportunity to succeed and to get their wings and to get their commissions. He was born in Versailles, Kentucky. Wow. His father was a preacher, a Methodist preacher, and they later went on to move to Waco, Texas. But he went on as a pilot of his own right, but then through the years he became the commandant of training for the cadets at Tuskegee.
Well, you know, we've seen movies now, and of course, if we are students of history, yes, we know about the Tuskegee Airmen, but so many people don't realize the contributions and the sacrifices and all of the obstacles these individuals faced. Talk a little bit about sort of setting the picture for us. It's World War II, and we are in need of aviators, and there are these bright individuals who are being told no, right?
They're being told no, but there was a lot of pressure brought to bear on President Roosevelt that we should try to get the black population involved with the war. There are a lot of these young men who said, this is my country, and I want to fight for it. And some of them were college graduates. Some of them had already gone to flying schools at various colleges around the country. Jim Crow was very apparent back then. A lot of people don't even know today who or really what Jim Crow was.
And of course, Jim Crow, the separation where we had the signage and different things to keep everyone separate based on skin color.
Right. And back then, it was still very separatist mentality amongst the officers and the commanders, because there's no way that they were going to put blacks and whites together in the same unit, nor would they have a black officer to tell a white sergeant what to do. So for all practical purposes, the Tuskegee Airmen were considered an experiment. And they had to be self-sufficient. And in that regard, they had to do everything for themselves within their own ranks, everything from the lowest to the highest. And the commander was General Benjamin Davis, but even to the lowest private, the cooks, the bakers, the candlestick makers, the mechanics, the parachute riggers, they had to do everything for themselves, because there's no way they were going to go to another unit, a white unit, and say, well, we need it. Yeah, right, that's not going to happen. Once in the field, though, the commanders of the various organizations really didn't want, they didn't want them in their commands to speak of. So they were, again, separated, but they were part of the big program when they went overseas called the 15th Air Force and the 8th Air Force, where they were able to shine as aerial combat, as an aerial combat unit. And they saved a lot of lives. Saved an awful lot of lives.
And made a big difference in World War II.
Made an excellent difference. You know, one of my mottos is that the Tuskegee Airmen are not just black history. Tuskegee are American history.
Right. And so often that is the case. It's American history, even though we may celebrate it in February or what have you. They came out of Tuskegee?
Yes, Tuskegee was really the mecca for the pilot training program for all practical purposes. That's where they got the basic instructions at Tuskegee. And the reason Tuskegee was selected, because there were other aviation schools by black institutions. Right. But Tuskegee was selected because it had the most favorable weather conditions year-round.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah. Ironically, yes, it was in the South.
Sure.
but they had Hampton University had one, and there was a one up here in Chicago put on and conducted by Willa Brown. So they had a flying school, but you can know what the weather was like in Chicago,
Sure.
so you couldn't depend upon good weather flying conditions year round. And this is at the early part of the war. Actually, Tuskegee Airmen were actually part of the war effort. Actually, before the war got started, because their first class got started in early 1941, even before they had declared war against the Axis powers.
Wow.
Okay? So there's a lot there about the Tuskegee Airmen. I mean, you just throw a spot on the wall, and I'll go ahead and chase it. Okay.
And of course, the German Nazis didn't think anything of fighting against these African Americans, right?
They had a lot of respect for them.
Did they?
Oh, yeah, the shucks. They knew a red tail when they saw it out there in the
Right.
clouds. And actually, the painting of the red tail was primarily to identify friendly aircraft within the Allies.
Okay.
But the Germans got wind of it, and so they knew, red tail's here, we'll go over in this section.
Right, okay.
They had a nickname for them after the war, which I heard about. They were referred to as the Schwarze Vogelmenschen. That's German, Schwarze Vogelmenschen, which means black birdmen.
Wow.
And so they had a lot of respect for them. And even in captivity, one of my favorite Tuskegee Airmen, Dr. Alex Jefferson, was a POW. And Jeff tells me, he says, they treated the German guards treated him better than he was treated by his own white countrymen. Okay.
Wow.
So.
And that happened a lot, and even when they came back from after serving, once they came back here to the States, right?
Yeah, once they got repatriated and came back to the States, one of the stories that the Tuskegee Airmen will tell you is that they would all be massed on the boats and the ships, so everybody's kind of intermingled there. And when the ships would come into the harbor and they would see the Statue of Liberty, and then all of a sudden, down at the bottom of the plank would be a soldier with a sign that'd say, whites to right, and all you
Well, we can go ahead and say the
colored folks,
right.
Well, they didn't call
They
them.
know, they use the N-word, sure.
Yeah, so y'all go this way, and then you go to the right, and then there'll be bands and dancing girls and kissing soldiers and all this other stuff, and go over here to where the blacks are coming off, and they had a little guy, and they had a bus, and some dude sitting around there blowing a saxophone, and that was their welcome home. And they would just say, we've been gone 4 years, and nothing has changed.
Things changed, though, after the Tuskegee Airmen. Things did change.
Yeah.
Slowly, but surely.
Surely, long years after. But, Tuskegee Airmen, as I do in my lectures, I tell everybody, I says, the Tuskegee Airmen were fighting against discrimination even before Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks.
That's right.
Those two folks, I don't take anything away from their contribution, obviously, but their contribution to equality and what have you is such that they put such a glaring light that everybody else who was doing something kind of like, ooh, we're blinded by all of that. But they were into the fray. The Tuskegee Airmen were into the fray about 9 years before the Tuskegee Airmen. Before Martin Luther King
And the full-blown civil rights movement.
That's correct.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
And I'll tell you something else. The name Tuskegee Airmen didn't come about until after they'd done their thing.
Really?
Oh yeah, it didn't come into being until about 1954.
Really? Yeah. Why did we all of a sudden decide to label them as the Tuskegee Airmen?
It was because there was a gentleman that wrote a book.
It always starts with a book, huh?
Yeah, he wrote a book and he says, okay, these guys are down in Tuskegee, so Tuskegee Airmen, Right. But back during the war, they were just known as those other black fellows out there. That was a unit of colored guys out there.
And of course, we're talking about Tuskegee Institute.
We're talking about not only that, but the fact that they were, the pilots themselves.
Right.
When we say the word Tuskegee Airmen, we must remember it wasn't just the pilots and the air crew. It was also those who were on the ground and supported them. You heard me mention earlier that everybody had to contribute. Right. So basically, there was roughly about 17-to-1 ratio of ground support.
Wow.
There were about 1,000 Tuskegee Airmen cadets that completed the program.
And it was rigorous. There was no freebie rides on this, was it? Maybe even a little harder?
As always, as always. And Boy, I tell you, the funny thing is that the irony of some of the stories I've heard is that, you know, if you got 3 pink slips, you could get wiped out just like that. And back then, if they didn't like the little scuff on your shoe,
Right.
you could complete the whole program.
And then it would be over.
And they said, if you got 3 slips, you're out of here, you know, just kick them to the curb, you know. And there were guys that were obviously good pilots,
Yeah.
better than some of the ones that maybe even made it, but because maybe it's an attitudinal thing, because the instructor.
Personality.
Personality. Yeah, they could pull that switch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You seem to be, when I'm watching you talk about it, you just light up. Why is this something that is just so special to you? And because I've been here 17 years and all I know is that you know everything there is to know about this. So what's your connection to it? Why do you love this part of history?
This was a part of my upbringing that just, I didn't get it when I was coming up. I made a trip to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum years ago, 15 to be exact. And I was dismayed by what I saw and what I didn't see about the Tuskegee Airmen and their history. So I just started digging, and the more I dug, the more I learned, and then I got to talking to some of the original. I've been blessed to have met some 200 of the original Tuskegee Airmen.
Wow.
And it just built a fire inside of me. And as I was explaining to our mutual friend, John, I said, you know, if you don't have the fire in the belly, then why are you doing it?
Right.
And I guess being one of the younger chapters that we have within the national organization, it's that fire in the belly that has kept us going. And we've done amazing things in 10 years.
Indeed, scholarships for young people.
Scholarship. This is our 10th year, by the way. In August will be our 10th year. And so we try to do everything that the mission statement calls for and then some. Teaching, teaching is where when you see young kids, their eyes light up. And they'll do certain studies and certain projects and you go, oh, that's so-and-so and that's so-and-so. Man, he said, he's got it. He's got it. Now, that's 1 out of 100, but he got it, okay? And there's a sense of, I was able to help continue to keep that message
Alive.
When you talk to originals, and we call them DOTAs, documented original Tuskegee Airmen, not just original Tuskegee Airmen. We use the prefix documented because we know they've been vetted, verified.
By the military.
Right.
Okay.
But I was dubbed by a DOTA to be a torchbearer. And well, I tell you, I said, I never want to let that man down because he went through things that I can't even begin to imagine what it was like to have been a Tuskegee Airman back in the day.
Indeed. African American Museum of History in D.C. now that's open.
Good.
Is there an exhibit?
There is. I haven't been there yet, but
Okay.
I'm told, I know for a fact they have one of the planes there that was donated, that they trained on, was the PT-17 Stearman. It was a very basic, it only flew maybe about 67 miles an hour, but enough to get airborne. But that's when they got their first introduction to actual flying. And a gentleman had acquired one, and he donated it to that effort. I'm told that there are some other exhibit items on the exhibit. Now, I like to take some of my own personal stuff over there.
And
but
a lot of people would love to see some of
yeah,
that
I
stuff.
got some good stuff
You
too. let me
sure
tell
do.
you.
You sure do. Ron, thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for joining us for this digital conversation. You can find more digital conversations online at lex18.com. Until next time.